Day 4, 100-day, 10 minutes a day taiko sticking challenge. I don't know how many of you are still here, but I think there is a slight drop on each day of the view on YouTube. But so hopefully you catch up if you're still in here with me. So just a review of the last 3 days. We have talked about a single pivot point right at the back, because obviously the furthest down the stick you're gonna get more power. If you're doing this, less power, and the further back the stick you're gonna get more power. So single pivot point with just the ring finger. All right, and then we talked about having a second pivot point, either your elbow, so in rotational hits, elbow lifting and double pivot point coming down at the same time. And then yesterday we talked about bouncing and catching. So bouncing off catching. The first day we did dribbling, just to make sure there's no tension. Yeah, do not grab before you hit. Okay, so dribbling. So and then once you know how to dribble and relax with a single power point, single pivot point, 2 pivot points, whatever you do, 2 elevation of your elbow, either sideways, forward, ideally forward, because this is neutral, keeping everything neutral in terms of not left, not right. You're not using any of your extenders or flexors, extenders. Look up at anatomy and all that. We'll talk about that more in detail one day. But for now, yesterday we talked about bouncing and catching. Bouncing, catching, bounce, catch, bounce, catch, bounce, catch, bounce, catch. That's a good way of testing, is double bounce, catch, double bounce, catch, double bounce, catch. You shouldn't feel any tension on your finger. If you hit too hard, you can feel a bit of a jolt on your finger. That means you're doing it wrong. So bounce, catch, bounce, double catch, double catch, double catch, double catch, double catch, double catch, double catch. Today we are going to do work on angles of attack. So if you're pivoting point, rotational, lifting second point, that's great. And then bouncing and catching, that's fine. You can bounce and catch forward, double bounce, catch, double bounce forward, same place, catch, whatever it is, that's fine. Now we're gonna look at, by the way, if you want to see it in motion, that's really cool, and in detail, YouTube, this is on YouTube, so you can play back at 0.5 or 0.25 to see this motion. Catch, bounce and catch, bounce and catch. If you slow it down on YouTube, you'll see the hands are relaxed when you hit, and then I'm catching after. It looks like a half mil, but in YouTube, if you slow it down, you can see it in detail. So if you, the same thing, if you give a lot of power, same thing, you should be able to relax while you hit. Yeah. And small. Same thing. Slow it down on YouTube if you don't believe me. Okay, so now today we're going to work on the attack angle of attack. So if you're hitting something directly flat, if you're hitting something like a bat directly flat, that's going to be hurt more than if you're hitting something like this. Yeah, so same thing, if you're hitting like this versus hitting it a flatter 90-degree angle. If you know anything about math, we're talking about force is ma, F equals ma, force is mass acceleration. You can't change your mass of your hands, but you can change acceleration, which means why you're having double pivot, you're going to get acceleration. If you're just doing this, you're not accelerating, you're just having, just a straight linear kind of force, which is maxed out. If you're accelerating, you're going to get much more force. Right, but also how you contact the force is usually perpendicular. Yeah, so if you hit it completely flat, so you pivot point very close to the drum. Okay, so that's why it's kind of very important to keep your stance low. Yeah, and hitting it sort of roughly this way so that all the mass can go down. So if you're hitting it too high, you're standing too high, that's sort of finish the full extension and then it's dropping. So you're losing some of that power. So you want to hit it as flat as possible, but not just hitting it as flat as possible. Try playing with the different angles of attack. Same pivot point, but how far you lift your pivot point from the surface. So we'll just try nice and relaxed, and then we'll lift it up a little bit. So you're hitting it a little bit higher than you need, and dropping down a little bit, so somewhere in between, and then dropping down slightly further. You can hear the difference in sound, and then dropping out even further and even further until you almost choke, like slapping it with the entire stick. If you can control it to constantly touch the whole stick, that's a sound on the taiko that's kind of interesting. You don't have to use it all the time, but yeah. So we're talking about slapping the pivot point very slow. If you can control it, you can get a full slap, and then slowly coming back up again. And you can see naturally, if you relax it a little bit higher, at some point, an experiment, you can get a double bounce without doing too much effort. If you're just relaxing your bit and you're changing the pivot point higher, you're gonna get a double bounce just without trying too much. An experiment, maybe go down a little bit, see what happens to your double catch, bounce catch, bounce catch. Go really low, almost slapping, maybe slapping. What does that do to the bounce? And feel the difference. A little bit higher, and you'll find there's some equilibrium somewhere in the middle between too high, where it bounces kind of shit, and somewhere in the middle where it bounces kind of pretty easily, to kind of bouncing quite fast, where it's really close. Kind of harder to control because it doesn't want to rotate anymore. When you hit it perpendicularly, the force goes upwards, not this way. Because when you're a little bit further, the force want to hit and bounce that way up, and when it's perpendicular, the force goes perpendicular back the same way. And obviously that is harder to bounce backwards to do your second bounce. But it is faster. So if you want to do something fast, you could use that. That's just two bounces, very perpendicular to a little bit higher and really high. But the really high ones are good for upstrokes. So if you want to use upstrokes in a playing, dun, 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 dun. Upstroke. It's better to go a little bit higher, and then somewhere in the middle is where your normal playing is, when the double is very easy and relaxed. And then for accents and something fast, you can go a little bit lower. You can do same pivot point, but really soft, and just soft lift to get speed if you needed to do something really fast. But it's the same mechanics. Pivot point, changing. I'm using a little bit of turning motion, which again we'll get to later. That's a bit more complicated. But essentially for today, bounce and catch, just for review. Bounce and catch. Rotational if you want. Make sure, and if you relax, you should get the second one very easily. Bounce and catch. Keep your Keep your fingers open and nice and relaxed. Open. Second pivot point, second pivot point, second pivot point, second pivot point, and then change your angle. Second pivot point, change your angle. How it stops. It's a little bit higher. Second pivot point, a little bit higher. Really high. So lifting higher doesn't mean the way you connect with the stick, with the drum pad is the same. So that's the takeaway for today. Changing different angles, different height of pivot pointing. And I've explained a little bit. We'll go much more in detail the pros and cons of the height. But in short, again, pivot point, bounce and catch, second pivot points, and then changing the angle for different things. At high, it's good. When it's really high, it's good for, as you can see, good for upstrokes, which we'll talk about one day. You can find your center line where it's comfortable, and then for accents and speed, quite low. That's it. That's the takeaway. Thank you. See you tomorrow, day 5.